The decision to take a year off work was supposed to be a journey of self-discovery and adventure, not a descent into a nightmare. But there I was, in the heart of a remote Yorkshire village, enveloped by the unforgiving night. My phone, my only tie to the modern world, had succumbed to the day's-long journey, leaving me stranded with no map, no light, and no direction. The roads twisted like serpents under the moonless sky, each turn leading me further into an unknown that seemed to swallow the very sound of my footsteps. Local folklore had always fascinated me, yet, as the reality of my isolation set in, those tales morphed into foreboding omens. The only piece of advice I clung to was from a weary barkeep who'd mentioned Chadwick Hall, a place he described with a hesitance that should have been my warning. As the silhouette of Chadwick Hall loomed before me, a shiver of unease crawled up my spine. It was as if the building itself was a living relic of the past, its towering spires and cold stone walls whispering secrets of a bygone era. In that moment, the line between sanctuary and tomb blurred, but the biting wind and the ache in my bones pushed me towards what I prayed was salvation. The grand oak doors of the hall creaked open with a ghostly moan, revealing a figure that seemed as out of place as I felt. The nun, clad in traditional garb, regarded me with eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Her voice, soft and melodic, offered shelter from the night, a beacon of hope in the overwhelming dread. But as she led me through the maze-like corridors, the flickering candles cast unsettling shadows, making the walls seem like they were closing in on me. The room she provided was Spartan at best, with nothing but a simple bed and a wooden crucifix hanging above it. Her parting words, delivered with a solemnity that chilled my blood, warned me against exploring the darkened halls at night. As she left, the weight of solitude pressed down on me, the silence of Chadwick Hall a stark contrast to the whistling wind outside. Despite the day's exhaustion, sleep was a reluctant companion. The room felt like a cell, the crucifix a silent sentinel in the oppressive darkness. My mind raced with thoughts of what lay beyond my door, of the stories and secrets that haunted the ancient walls of Chadwick Hall. Little did I know, the true terror lay not in the hidden corners of the old building, but in the unseen, waiting for the dead of night to reveal itself. The night in Chadwick Hall unfolded like a scene from an old Gothic tale, where every creak and whisper through the ancient building seemed laden with hidden menace. My initial exhaustion gave way to restless tossing and turning as the bed's straw mattress scratched at my skin and the eerie silence of the hall pressed heavily against my ears. It was a silence so profound, it felt like a living entity, a suffocating void that my mind rushed to fill with imagined whispers and faint rustlings from the unseen corners of the room. Then, abruptly, the stillness shattered. Faint at first, the whispers seeped into my room, slithering under the door and winding around me like cold fingers. They were indistinct, a chorus of hushed tones that melded with the night, making it impossible to discern if they emanated from within the hall or the confines of my own mind. Yet, there was an undeniable pull to them, an eerie siren song that beckoned me with the promise of unseen mysteries and hidden truths. Compelled by a mix of fear and an insatiable human curiosity, I rose from the bed. The stone floor was ice under my feet, sending another shiver up my spine, not entirely from the cold. Clad only in my nightwear, I approached the door, each step tentative as if the very act of moving could awaken something best left undisturbed. Cracking the door open, I was greeted by the hall's elongated shadows, cast by the dim light of moonbeams filtering through distant windows. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if aware of my presence and eager to entice me further into the dark embrace of the building. I hesitated, memories of Sister Mary's warning echoing in my mind, a stark reminder of the boundary I was about to cross. But the human psyche is a strange landscape, often driven more by the fear of not knowing than the fear of any tangible danger. With a breath that felt like it could be my last, I stepped into the corridor, the whispers now a clear call, leading me as if by a thread through the labyrinthine heart of Chadwick Hall. The source was the chapel, a realization that dawned with a mix of relief and dread. The chapel, a place of worship and peace, now the stage for something entirely different, something that the rational part of my mind screamed to flee from. Yet there I stood at the threshold of the unknown, driven by an inexplicable need to uncover the truth behind the nocturnal mystery of Chadwick Hall. As I edged closer, the chapel door ajar, the whispers crescendoed into a low, monotonous chant. Peering inside, I was unprepared for the sight that met my eyes. A congregation of nuns, mirror images of Sister Mary, formed a circle around an unseen force. Their faces were serene, yet utterly devoid of humanity, as if they were marionettes animated by some unfathomable will. The air around them rippled with a palpable tension, a visual distortion that threatened the very fabric of reality. Fear, raw and consuming, clawed at my chest. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but stand frozen at the doorway to madness. Yet, there was a mesmerizing aspect to the scene, a horrifying beauty that held me spellbound and silent. In that moment, I was no longer a mere observer, but a captive of the dark symphony that played out before my eyes, a silent witness to a ritual that defied explanation and threatened to unravel the very boundaries of my understanding. As I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the doorway, my heart pounding against my ribcage, I watched the bizarre ritual unfold with a mix of horror and fascination. The nuns moved in a precise, almost mechanical fashion, their movements synchronized as if controlled by a singular, unseen force. The air within the chapel seemed to throb with an unspeakable energy, making the candle flames flicker and dance in a frenzied, unnatural rhythm. The center of their circle remained obscured, hidden from my view, but it was clear that their attention, their devotion, was directed towards whatever resided there. The chanting intensified, a language unfamiliar and ancient, resonating through the stone walls and into the very core of my being. It felt as though the words themselves carried weight, a palpable darkness that pressed against me, urging me to flee, yet holding me firmly in place. Driven by a sudden impulse, I shifted slightly, trying to glimpse the focus of their ceremony. That's when I made the mistake that would haunt me for years to come. My foot brushed against the door, sending a soft echo through the oppressive silence of the chant. Time seemed to freeze, the only movement the slow, synchronized turn of the nuns' heads towards me. Their eyes, void of any human emotion, bore into me, and I felt an icy dread clamp around my heart. In that split second, I realized the enormity of my intrusion. This was no ordinary prayer meeting. It was something otherworldly, something that should have remained hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated. The figure that stood at the center of their circle, previously shrouded in darkness, turned to face me. It wasn't human, not entirely. Its form seemed to shift and waver, like a shadow given half-life, its features a nightmarish blend of the familiar and the grotesque. Panic seized me, a primal, overwhelming urge to escape the madness I had stumbled upon. I turned and fled, the chilling sounds of their chanting now morphed into angry, cacophonous shouts that filled the halls with their fury. I ran through the twisting corridors, the echoes of my footsteps a frantic drumbeat against the stone floors. I didn't dare look back, fueled by the terror of what might be following me from the depths of that cursed chapel. As I burst into the cold night air, the oppressive atmosphere of the hall fell away, replaced by the biting chill of the Yorkshire night. But the relief was fleeting, overshadowed by the overwhelming certainty that what had just occurred was no mere figment of imagination, no trick of the mind. It was real as the palpable fear that clung to me, a dark shroud that whispered of unseen horrors lurking in the shadowed corners of the world. I didn't stop running until the lights of the village pierced the darkness, guiding me back to a semblance of reality. But even as I left Chadwick Hall behind, the memory of that night, of the unholy ritual, and the nightmarish figures clung to me. A sinister reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The days following my harrowing escape from Chadwick Hall were a blur of sleepless nights and jumpy days. I tried to convince myself that what I had witnessed was the product of fatigue and an overactive imagination, but the vivid memories refused to be dismissed so easily. Every shadow seemed to whisper secrets in the dead of night, and every creak of my London apartment spoke of hidden watchers. The boundary between reality and nightmare had been irrevocably blurred. I sought normalcy with a desperate fervor, throwing myself into my work and social engagements with an intensity that left little room for brooding. But solitude became a battleground, a time when the memories like vengeful spirits broke through my defenses with ease. The faces of the nuns, their chants, and the indescribable entity they worshipped, they invaded my dreams, turning rest into a time of terror and exhaustion. In an effort to exorcise my demons, I began to research Chadwick Hall and its history. But information was scarce. The convent seemed to exist in a bubble, untouched by time and unconcerned with the outside world. Local archives and inquiries yielded little more than whispered rumors and sidelong glances, tales of a convent that had stood since the Middle Ages, shrouded in mystery and tragedy. It was as if the very fabric of reality conspired to keep Chadwick Hall's secrets, reinforcing my isolation and the gnawing fear that I had brushed against something ancient and malevolent. Weeks turned into months, and the sharp edges of my terror dulled into a constant, nagging dread. I convinced myself that distance and time would eventually wash away the stain of that night. Yet, the sense of being watched, of being followed by an unseen presence, persisted. It was a shadow that clung to my every step, a cold breath on the back of my neck in moments of solitude. The final straw came one evening as I walked home from work, the streets of London awash with the golden hues of sunset. The feeling of being followed, which had become a constant companion, intensified suddenly. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, every instinct screaming that I was no longer alone. A quick glance over my shoulder confirmed my worst fears. A figure, cloaked in darkness, its features obscured but unmistakably reminiscent of the nuns of Chadwick Hall, stood motionless in the middle of the bustling street. Yet, no one else seemed to notice it. They passed by it as if it were made of air, a phantom invisible to all but me. Panic, raw and all-consuming, propelled me forward, my feet pounding against the pavement as I dashed through the crowded streets, the sounds of the city fading into a distant murmur. Only when I had barricaded myself within my apartment, with all the lights ablaze, did I dare to breathe. But the illusion of safety shattered like glass as I realized that the horror of Chadwick Hall had not been contained within its ancient walls. It had followed me, crossing boundaries and miles, a malevolent shadow that refused to be left behind. That night, as I cowered in my brightly lit living room, I understood with chilling clarity that my encounter at Chadwick Hall was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of an ordeal that defied explanation. The line between my once ordinary existence and the realm of nightmares had been irrevocably erased, leaving me to ponder the terrifying possibility that some doors, once opened, might never be closed again. 5 years have passed since that nightmarish stay at Chadwick Hall, yet the scars it left on my psyche are as vivid as ever. Time, they say, heals all wounds, but some horrors are immune to time's balm, etching themselves into the fabric of one's soul, a constant, unyielding presence. I had moved homes twice, changed jobs, even sought the solace of therapists and the cold logic of skeptics. Yet the shadow of that night lingered, a specter that no light could dispel, no reason could explain. My life had become a meticulous routine of avoidance and safety measures, a fortress of normalcy built to shield me from the echoes of the past. But the deeper the foundations of this fortress, the more insidious the whisperings from the other side became. Sleep, once a refuge, now became a gateway to reliving that terror, the chants and the cold, lifeless eyes of the nuns invading my dreams with relentless regularity. It was during one of these troubled nights, amidst the sweat-soaked sheets and the hammering heartbeats, that I first heard it again. The unmistakable sound of that ancient, guttural chanting, a chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very walls of my room. I jolted upright, my eyes scanning the familiar shadows of my bedroom, half expecting to see the cloaked figures of the nuns surrounding my bed. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence and the lingering echoes of the chant, a sound so real, so tangible, I could almost feel the breath of those uttering it. The days that followed were tainted by a growing sense of unease, a palpable tension in the air that made every moment an exercise in controlled panic. I found myself scrutinizing faces in the crowd, searching for that same lifeless gaze, jumping at shadows and the slightest of sounds. The world around me, once so vibrant and full of life, had dimmed, reduced to a monochrome shadow of its former self, a stage upon which the drama of my fears played endlessly. The climax of this descent into madness came on an evening much like any other, with the setting sun casting long shadows across my living room. I was attempting to lose myself in the pages of a book, a futile effort to silence the whispers of my mind, when a sudden sharp knock shattered the illusion of peace. My heart stopped, every nerve ending screaming to ignore the intrusion, to remain shrouded in the safety of denial. But something, a perverse mixture of fear and an inexplicable compulsion, drew me towards the door. With trembling hands, I opened it to find nothing but the empty hallway of my apartment building, the lights flickering ominously. As I stood there, peering into the shadows, a cold breeze whispered past me, carrying with it the faintest trace of a chant, a melody that froze my blood and constricted my soul. It was then, in that threshold between my constructed sanctuary and the world outside, that I understood the true nature of the horror I had encountered. It was not confined to a place or a time, but had become a part of me, a curse woven into the very essence of my being. Now, as I write this, I am a man haunted not by the ghosts of the past, but by the realization that some experiences irrevocably change us, binding us to their memory with chains stronger than steel. The nuns of Chadwick Hall, their dark rituals, and the unspeakable horror they worshipped have become more than just memories. They are a constant, lurking threat, a reminder that some doors, once opened, release shadows that never fully recede. So I share this tale as a warning and a plea. Beware the curiosity that tempts you towards the unknown, for there are truths in this world that once known can never be forgotten, and horrors that, once unleashed, can follow you for a lifetime.